Distinguished guests, friends, this is a very special morning. The hallmark of every great nation is not that it has all the answers. It is that it never stops asking the right questions. Such nations possess the confidence to examine themselves honestly, the wisdom to learn from experience, and the courage to continually renew themselves for the future. They understand that national transformation is never a destination to be reached. Rather, it is a continuous process of reflection, adaptation, and reinvention. It was in recognition of this truth, in my State of the Nation address last year, I invited Kenyans to begin looking beyond today's challenges and to start reflecting on what our future should look like. As part of that national reflection, I informed the nation of my extensive consultation with current and former national leaders, including my predecessor, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and the late Right Honorable Raila Odinga. I have also engaged governors, members of parliament, business leaders, professionals, scholars, and young people. In my conversation with the late Right Honorable Raila Odinga, he consistently reminded me that no nation has ever developed without inclusivity and unity in diversity. I remember he mentioned to me about infrastructure, and infrastructure. My discussions with President Uhuru Kenyatta similarly underscored the importance of continuity in national development and the need to build upon foundations already laid. Together with many other engagements, those reflections reinforced a simple but profound lesson. Every nation that has transformed itself first imagined a future greater than its present, and then pursued that future with discipline, consistency, and patience. In that same State of the Nation address, I informed Kenyans that having restored stability, rebuilt confidence, strengthened our economy, and laid the foundation for sustained inclusive growth under the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, we were now ready to take Kenya to the next level. I therefore outlined our roadmap for the next phase of our country's transformation, including the establishment of two enduring national institutions: the National Infrastructure Fund, to finance the infrastructure that will underpin our future competitiveness, and the Sovereign Wealth Fund, to preserve and invest our national wealth for the benefit of the future generations. I am pleased that since then, we have moved from commitment to implementation. The National Infrastructure Fund has now been established in law, its board appointed, and the institution's secretariat is underway. The Sovereign Wealth Fund has likewise been established in law and will now be operationalized, completing another important milestone in building the institutions that will support Kenya's long-term development. These institutions form part of a broader strategy that is already guiding Kenya's long-term transformation into a competitive first world country. But institutions alone do not build great nations. They must also be guided by great ideas. Following extensive consultations with many stakeholders, particularly with the former Prime Minister, and as part of our broader national reflection, I invited Professor Hiroyuki Hino, Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, and their distinguished colleagues to undertake an exercise in scholarship and strategic thinking on Kenya's future beyond Vision 2030. Today, we receive the outcome of that important assignment. On behalf of the government and the people of Kenya, and on my own behalf, I sincerely thank Professor Hino, who is not here with us. He was meant to be here, but due to flight complications, he was not able to come. But I'm told he will be joining us in due course. Thank Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, Professor Michael Chege, Professor Karuti Kanyinga, Professor Peter Wanyande, and every contributor for this remarkable act of scholarship and patriotism. Asanteni sana. It is true that when I discuss this matter with colleagues and the senior leaders in our country, we said let's start somewhere. And I did ask Professor Hino, Professor Michael, and Professor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o here to give us some ideas. And they developed a team with which they worked with, and we are very happy that we now have a report. This proposal is a thoughtful and valuable contribution to an important national conversation. Its value lies not in providing every answer, not even in the composition of the team, but in asking important questions, challenging our assumptions, broadening our thinking, and enriching our reflection on the choices that will shape Kenya's future. All these efforts are driven by one larger reality. For nearly 2 decades, Vision 2030 has provided our nation with a shared sense of direction. It has guided reforms, inspired investment, and shaped Kenya's development journey. But every nation and every national vision eventually reaches its sunset. As Vision 2030 approaches its conclusion, the responsibility now falls upon our generation to imagine what comes next. I have just had an opportunity to glance through this report. While I have much more to study and reflect upon, I am encouraged that many of the issues it raises speak to the strategic direction we have already begun pursuing. Far from beginning from scratch, the report builds upon foundations already being laid while offering thoughtful perspectives that can enrich Kenya's long-term transformation. These are ideas that deserve careful study, thoughtful reflection, and broad national engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, development cannot be a project of one administration, nor should every election require us to abandon one national vision and begin another. Professor has told us nations don't develop by accident. It has to be intentional, deliberate, planned. Nations that achieve lasting prosperity succeed because they sustain a common purpose across decades, even as administrations change. Kenya must cultivate that same discipline. We must think beyond electoral cycles, sustain what works, improve what can be made better, and build a national consensus around our long-term aspirations. I have said that we have done so much to get our country's economy on the rails. And 3 years ago is so fresh in my mind when we sat in a room called Room 6 here with colleagues and friends, including David and my Council of Advisors. And that the situation then was very different from the situation today. In that room, 3.5 years ago, we were grappling with a $2 billion debt that was threatening to torpedo our country. Today here, we're discussing the National Infrastructure Fund, which has $2.7 billion cash, not debt. That, in my opinion, is significant. Also, when I had a conversation with my predecessor, and he talked to me about continuity, I remember when we prepared the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, and I am very proud about the manifesto that we wrote. Sometimes I ask myself how we managed to write such a manifesto. And I want to thank my predecessor, President Uhuru Kenyatta. He gave me leave of absence for like 2 years. And I used that time to write this manifesto. With David and colleagues, we sat in my office in Karen and we went through. And most of what is in that manifesto has a huge element of continuity, whether it is on education, on health, on housing, on agriculture. It has a big reflection on what we had tried to do in Jubilee under President Uhuru. We remember very well that the foundation was laid on our education. First president of Kenya laid the foundation on matters education. The second president expanded education, created more institutions, additional universities. President Mwai Kibaki came with universal primary education. President Kenyatta told us effectively that we must have 100% transition. And it has been my responsibility to make sure that when we have 100% transition, we have the classrooms. That's why we built 23,000 classrooms to eliminate the gaps that were there. we must have enough teachers. That's why we've hired 100,000 teachers. And I want to say we have worked on the university funding model now, or higher education funding model for that matter. And because we have members of parliament here, including the chair of education, Mr. Meli here, that now we have in parliament the final version of how we are going to make higher education universal.